What if the ring your mother left behind could expose the darkest secret of a billionaire? This is the true story of Benjamin Williams, a waiter who became a warrior for justice. A story of power, silence, and a son who refused to forget. Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see justice forever. Excuse me, sir, but my mother had a ring exactly like that one, the 26-year-old black waiter said softly, his eyes fixed on the man's hand. The words landed like a bomb in the middle of Manhattan's most luxurious restaurant. Silence fell. Nicholas Blackstone, 62, real estate tycoon worth over $3 billion, suddenly felt the blood drain from his face. The ring on his finger was one of a kind, a Burmese ruby circled by diamonds crafted in 1942. Only two were ever made. That's impossible, Blackstone muttered, his voice unsteady. Pinned to the server's chest was a name tag mark. His smile was still polite professional, but his eyes were piercingly calm. The kind of calm only possessed by someone who holds a truth no one can run from. Mark had only been working at the restaurant for 3 months, but he knew the regulars well, especially the man at table 17, always alone, always arrogant, always treating the staff like they were invisible. Could just be a coincidence, Mark said, his tone carrying a flicker of irony. My mom always said that ring was a gift from a very generous former employer. Blackstone clenched his napkin so tightly the fabric nearly tore. His hand began to tremble. That second ring, the one he had given to a young housekeeper back in 1995, should have vanished forever along with her. And your mother? He asked, trying to sound casual. Does she still have the ring? She did, Mark replied, but she passed 2 years ago. Cancer. We couldn't afford treatment. The answer hit like a sentence. Blackstone knew exactly who Mark's mother was. He knew what he had done and why she had vanished from the city, taking only the ring as the silent witness to a tragedy that had spanned a decade. Mark adjusted the tray in his hand, his posture calm, almost effortless. Would you like to see a photo of my mother? He asked. She kept a lot of them, from back when she used to work for powerful men. Blackstone froze. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a declaration carefully scripted, rehearsed word for word. No need, he said sharply, his voice louder than intended. Mark nodded. Of course. But if you change your mind, I'm always happy to share. Because some stories deserve to be told. Don't you think? He turned and walked away, feeling Blackstone's panic-laced gaze follow him all the way to the kitchen. The plan he'd spent 2 years building had just begun, and the best part, Blackstone had no idea he'd just stepped into a trap set long ago. 2 hours later, with the restaurant closed for the night, Mark stepped outside, only to find Nicholas Blackstone waiting by his gleaming silver Bentley, a car worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. We need to talk, Blackstone said, trying to mask fear with authority. But Mark could see right through it, the nervous tremor behind the facade. Of course, Mr. Blackstone. I just got off shift. He walked closer to the man who haunted his childhood, calm, composed, and that composure only made Blackstone feel the grip slipping from a game he thought he controlled. What was your mother's name? Blackstone asked, his voice now laced with suspicion. Monica Williams. She worked at your estate in Greenwich, back in 1995. The name landed like a punch straight into Blackstone's memory. The 19-year-old girl who had come begging for a job pregnant, abandoned by her boyfriend. The same girl who had accidentally overheard confidential calls, laundering schemes, bribes, forged documents for illegal development deals. Monica. I don't recall anyone by that name. Blackstone lied, but his voice betrayed him. Mark let out a quiet laugh, no longer the polite smile from the dining room, but something colder, sharper. That's strange. My mother remembered every detail, especially the night you gave her that ring. That night, December 1995, Monica had been cleaning the office when she heard Blackstone yelling into the phone. He spoke of bribed officials' files that needed to disappear, even names of people who wouldn't make it to the end of the year. When he saw her listening, he didn't yell. He simply walked over and asked, cold as ice, "How much did you hear?" "Nothing." "I was just cleaning," she said. They both knew it was a lie. He had taken off that ruby ring not as a gift, but as a contract. This ring's worth more than 10 years of your salary, but if you ever speak a word, I promise you, and that baby will vanish without a trace. Monica accepted the ring with trembling hands. It was the price of silence, a price she would carry for the rest of her life. My mother never said a word, Mark continued. She moved to Detroit, raised me alone, worked 3 jobs, but she always believed that someday the truth would come out. Blackstone tried to regain control. Look, young man, I don't know what your mother imagined, but I can help. A better job, $50,000. Let's just forget this fantasy. Mark stared at him, unblinking. Interesting. My mom died, leaving over $230,000 in hospital bills. Insurance wouldn't cover the treatment that might have saved her life. And you think $50,000 is enough? Blackstone was sweating now. Mark wasn't some desperate victim. He couldn't be bought. He couldn't be scared off. 100,000. Final offer. His voice was visibly shaking. Mark shook his head. You still don't get it. This was never about money. Then what do you want, Justice? Mark looked straight at the man who once threatened his mother's life. She lived 29 years in fear, couldn't list your mansion as work experience, moved from city to city terrified you'd find her. And in the end, she died believing that if she ever spoke up, I would be the one to suffer. Monica had tried to tell her story, but a journalist pulled the article at the last minute. A civil rights attorney had his office broken into, all her files disappeared. Over time, she realized the kind of power Blackstone wielded. She died believing you were untouchable. But times have changed, Mark said. And you haven't. Still thinking everyone has a price. Blackstone snarled. Watch your mouth. I've got lawyers who can destroy your life with a single phone call. Mark gave a small, calm smile. I'm sure you do. But I have something your lawyers can't buy. Oh, really, what's that? Mark looked him straight in the eye. Patience. And a plan that took 2 years to build. He turned and walked away, leaving Blackstone frozen under the weight of the night. The vow made at his mother's grave was finally in motion. Monica Williams had died in silence, but her son would not. In the 2 weeks that followed, Blackstone tried everything to break him. It started with anonymous phone calls at 3 a.m., unmarked cars parked outside the small apartment where Mark lived with 2 college friends. Then came the pressure at work, a casual conversation between Blackstone and the restaurant owner, suggesting that certain employees might not be the best for a place with this kind of clientele. But Mark had been taught by his mother from an early age, patience beats power when power gets sloppy. On a stormy Thursday night, as Mark stood waiting for the bus, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit approached. You have no idea what you're getting into, the man said. Mark turned calmly. Are you Nicholas Blackstone? I'm Michael Harrison, his attorney. And I assume you don't want this to end up in court. Mark smiled, that signature cold smile that had become his quiet rebellion. Court, I never said anything about court. I just mentioned my mom had a pretty unique ring, that's all. Harrison looked at him again. This young man wasn't the desperate target he'd assumed. Not scared, not swayed. My client is making one final offer, $250,000. You sign an NDA and this all goes away. Mark paused, thought for a moment, then said, Interesting, but I've got a better offer. I'm listening. Nothing. Excuse me, no offer. Because this was never about money, Mr. Harrison. It's about something your client lost a long time ago and can never buy back. What's that? Mark stepped onto the bus, turning only once, his voice cutting through the rain, peaceful sleep. What Harrison and Blackstone didn't know was that Mark wasn't alone. 3 months before he even applied for the waiter job, he had reached out to the one person who could help him dig into the legal shadows surrounding Nicholas Blackstone. Jessica Chun, assistant U.S. attorney specializing in financial crime and corruption, and the same woman who had once met his mother. Your mom came into my office back in 2018, Jessica said during their first meeting. She had documents, dates, names, enough to start an investigation. Then why didn't anything happen? Mark asked. Because just 48 hours later, Jessica said the key witness, a former employee who agreed to confirm her story, died in a car accident. 2 others disappeared from the city without a trace. Mark clenched his fists, but Jessica's voice was steady. Things are different now. The Panama Papers' new financial transparency laws, public pressures rising. In 2018, he was untouchable. Now he's a target. It was Jessica who taught Mark how to record every interaction from bribery and threats to face conversations. He's behaving exactly as we predicted, she said, listening to the audio playback. Arrogant, panicked, and unintentionally committing new crimes while trying to cover up the old ones. How much longer? Mark asked. 2 weeks. There's a federal audit scheduled for next month. If we submit the evidence before that, they'll launch a full criminal investigation. Mark nodded, but he had more than just a legal plan. He had a personal one, a strike Blackstone would never see coming. 2 days later, while Mark was mid-shift, his phone buzzed with an unknown caller, Mark Williams. "This is Theodore Blackstone." The name stopped Mark cold. "Nicholas's son brother I'd like to meet, privately." They agreed on a quiet cafe in Brooklyn. Unlike Nicholas, Theodore Blackstone radiated integrity. At 35, he had already distanced himself from the family empire once he discovered the rot at its foundation. "I hired a private investigator when I started having doubts," he explained. "They found at least 6 families who were either silenced or threatened. Your mother was one of them." He slid a folder across the table to Mark. Fake contracts, payoffs to officials, memos about how to handle witnesses, all from my father's office. Mark opened the folder, his pulse pounding. Everything was there, 30 years of corruption documented in meticulous detail. "Why are you giving this to me?" Mark asked. "Because I want my son to grow up knowing that when I had to choose between family and justice, I chose the right side." That night, Mark called Jessica. "We've got him," he said. Because true victory wasn't just about evidence, it wasn't just about court. It was about forcing Nicholas Blackstone to face the truth in front of the entire country. The following Wednesday night, Manhattan lit up with luxury. It was the city's most prestigious charity gala held at the elite hotel. Tickets ran $5,000 a seat, live-streamed across every major social platform. The kind of event where Nicholas Blackstone always had his own table, shaking hands with politicians, preaching about social responsibility, basking in the glow of generosity. Mark stepped into the ballroom dressed in the catering uniform, tray of champagne in hand. Just like his mother once did, invisible, unacknowledged. "Champagne, Mr. Blackstone," he said, standing in front of the main table where Blackstone was posing for a photo with the mayor. The billionaire froze. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Working," Mark replied calmly. "Just like my mother used to, back when you threatened to kill her." The air around them froze. The mayor and guests looked on in stunned confusion. Blackstone barked. "Security," Mark raised a hand. "No need, sir. I'm only here to return something. That belongs to you." He placed an envelope on the table right in front of the live broadcast cameras. Inside were copies of every document Theodore had provided, along with audio recordings of every conversation, every bribe, every threat from the past few weeks. "You once said everyone has a price," Mark said loud enough for the microphones to catch. "But you forgot to ask, what's the price of justice?" Blackstone opened the envelope. His face turned pale as he flipped through the pages. Crime after crime laid bare, bribery witness, intimidation, tax fraud, corruption, and more. "How? How did you get this?" he whispered. "From your own son," Mark replied. The entire ballroom went silent. Cameras turned to capture Blackstone's face, twisted in panic. And at that exact moment, Jessica Chun entered, flanked by 4 federal agents. She announced loud and clear, "Nicholas Blackstone, you are under arrest for coercion, bribery of public officials, tax fraud, and witness intimidation." Cameras flashed, handcuffs clicked. Blackstone screamed in desperation, "You're making a mistake. I have lawyers. I have power." Mark stepped closer, looked him in the eye one last time. "You know the difference between you and me, Mr. Blackstone. You believe power means taking what you want from those with less. But I've learned that real power is using the system itself to bring down the ones who think they're above it." Blackstone thrashed, shouting, "You think this will bring your mother back?" Mark smiled, not with hatred, but with peace. "No. But it might stop other mothers from going through what mine did, and that's enough." He turned to face the cameras still streaming live. "My name is Mark Williams. My mother's name was Monica Williams. For 29 years, she lived in fear of a man who believed he was above the law. Tonight, we proved no one is. That line spread like wildfire. The live stream was cut, but it was already too late. Social media exploded. The story went everywhere. Amid the chaos, Theodore stepped forward. "Thank you," he said, "for doing what I never had the courage to do. And thank you for giving me the tools to do what was right," Mark replied. He handed Jessica a small recording device. "Tonight's conversation, he tried to bribe me again before you arrived." Jessica shook her head, both impressed and slightly amused. "You recorded that too," Mark nodded. "My mother used to say, the truth always finds a way. We just have to help it speak." Moments later, 3 more of Blackstone's victims stood up. They weren't afraid anymore. Blackstone's stock plummeted. Business partners cut ties. Federal investigations launched across multiple states. That night, as Mark walked out of the hotel, he knew his mother, Monica Williams, could finally rest in peace. 6 months after Nicholas Blackstone's arrest, Mark Williams sat in his new office, a building overlooking Central Park. But this time, he wasn't a waiter passing through the world of the wealthy. He was the founder of the Monica Williams Foundation, built with the recovered assets seized from the crumbling Blackstone empire. The organization had already helped 43 families, all victims of corporate abuse, people once silenced, threatened, and forgotten. Meanwhile, Nicholas Blackstone, the man who once ruled real estate, now sat alone in a jail cell awaiting trial. Old friends, former allies all gone, his assets frozen. And his once unshakable legal team had just one desperate move left: petition the court to reduce bail to $50 million, a number he could no longer afford. During a board meeting at the foundation, Jessica Chun glanced at Mark and let out a bitter laugh. He spent his whole life buying people. But when he finally needed someone real, he learned money can't buy loyalty. Theodore Blackstone, the son who turned against his father in the name of justice, took over the company and launched a victim compensation initiative. At the press conference, he stated, "Some empires have to be rebuilt from the ground up with transparency and integrity." The story of Mark and Monica Williams became a turning point. Other states began adopting the investigative model Jessica and Mark pioneered. The press dubbed it the Williams Doctrine, a new legal foundation for protecting whistleblowers and holding white-collar criminals accountable. Mark no longer served drinks, but he kept a photo of his old restaurant team on his desk. Some of his former co-workers now worked for the foundation. Others had moved on to better opportunities thanks to recommendation letters written by Mark himself. 3 months after Blackstone's arrest, a 60-year-old woman named Patricia Johnson walked into the foundation. She told a story eerily similar to Monica's, forced into silence, threatened living a lifetime in fear. This time, Mark was there to listen and to act. At her first hearing, Mark stood and said, "My mother died believing she was alone. Today, no one has to fight alone." Blackstone made one last desperate move, offering a list of corrupt businessmen in exchange for a reduced sentence. But even secrets had lost their value. The name Blackstone had become a symbol not of power, but of exposed rot. On the day of sentencing, Mark sat in the courtroom. The verdict, 25 years in federal prison. When their eyes met one final time, Mark no longer felt hatred, only peace. After the trial, Mark turned to Theodore and said, "He asked me if I felt satisfied. I told him that satisfied is too small a word. This is justice, this is closure, this is proof the system can work if someone is willing to stand up." The Monica Williams Foundation grew rapidly. Volunteer lawyers, idealistic journalists, retired investigators, people from all walks of life came forward wanting to be part of something that could change the world. 1 year after Blackstone's arrest, Mark was invited to speak at a law school graduation at the very school his mother once dreamed of attending, before an unplanned pregnancy and a maid's uniform ended that path. Standing before hundreds of students, Mark said Monica Williams never had the chance to fight for justice in a courtroom. "But she taught me this: justice isn't just the privilege of the educated, it's the responsibility of the brave." His mother's ruby ring, the piece of evidence that once brought Blackstone down, now hung in the foundation's main hall. Next to it, a small plaque read, "Monica Williams, 1976 to 2023. She taught us that forced silence isn't the end of a story, it's the beginning of a fight for those who love enough to continue it. Nicholas Blackstone had tried to rewrite history with money and power, but he learned the hard way some forces are greater than wealth memory, justice, and the love of a son who refused to let his mother's story die in silence. Mark Williams proved that the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's creating something so beautiful, so unshakable that evil becomes irrelevant. He stood by the window looking out over the park, thinking of something his mother once told him. The truth has legs. Sometimes it just needs someone to teach it how to run, from silence to justice, from pain to power. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of courage, truth, and redemption. Because sometimes justice begins with a whisper and ends with a roar.